drop it. All right, well, Turks here, power panel. Okay, Cenk, Uygur, Iadarola, Ashlee Marie Preston. Ashlee, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
No problem, thanks for being on. Ashlee, I've heard amazing things about you. No pressure, okay? You just have to be amazing for the rest of the show, okay? Not a big deal, all right? So we do have a lot for you guys. Our TYT Army strikes again, and you guys are gonna love it. Too good. Too strong, too good. This time it's Pete Buttigieg. So that's a little bit later in the program. Trump's a clown, that's later in the program. But the most important story is who is trying to start a war with Iran? Because the official story out of America ain't true. And of course, as usual, cable news reporting it as if it is true for 24 hours, 7 days a week. It's nonstop, rotating. Iran has attacked the ship in the Straits of Hormuz. They have not. Now, do I know definitively? No, but as you will see later in the show, it's as close to definitive as it gets that we're totally and utterly making it up. So that is a disastrous story.
Well, if it comes down to trusting you or John Bolton has the experience, so.
He does have experience in starting wars, that is for sure. All right, anyway, that's later in the program. We got a ton of stuff for you guys later in the program. So let's get started right now. John, go.
Okay, let's do it. Today, Donald Trump backtracked, sort of. You say backtrack because that's what he's trying to do, but he backtracked to some extent on his comments made earlier this week that he would gladly accept help from foreign actors in the next election. That was kind of a bad move constitutionally, and so today he said this.
You have to look at it, because if you don't look at it, you're not going to know if it's bad. How are you going to know if it's bad? But of course you give it to the FBI or report it to the Attorney General or somebody like that. But of course you do that. You couldn't have that happen with our country, and everybody understands that. And I thought it was made clear. In fact, I actually said at the beginning, I think I said I'd do both. But how are you going to, if you don't hear what it is, you're not going to know what it is. I mean, how can you report something that you don't know?
Listen to it.
So, Mr. President,
no, they say, oh, he would accept it. Well, if I don't listen, you're not going to know. Now, if I thought anything was incorrect or badly stated, I'd report it to the Attorney General, the FBI.
Okay, so there's a lot of issues with that, but let's just jump right out by saying that what he is talking about is like, you do what you want, maybe you do, maybe you don't, is clearly illegal. That's coming from people who know, including the head of the FEC that put out a statement saying, let me make something 100% clear to the American public and anyone running for public office. It is illegal for any person to solicit, accept, or receive anything of value from a foreign national in connection with a US election. This is not a novel concept. Electoral intervention from foreign governments has been considered unacceptable since the beginning of our nation. Our founding fathers sounded the alarm about foreign interference, intrigue, and influence. They knew that when foreign governments seek to influence American politics, it is always to advance their own interests, not America's. Anyone who solicits or accepts foreign assistance risks being on the wrong end of a federal investigation. Any political campaign that receives an offer of a prohibited donation from a foreign source should report that offer to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I apologize, that was very small font that I was reading on my paper. But yeah, it's illegal.
Okay, the part I want to emphasize is it is illegal for any person to solicit, accept, or receive anything of value from a foreign national in connection with a US election. So the very act of receiving and accepting the information, what Trump calls, I'm just gonna look at it, I'm just gonna look at it to see what kind of oppo research they have that I could later use against my opponent, that is in itself illegal. It's not like, well, I looked at it and see if it was gonna be something illegal and then I decided whether I was gonna take an illegal action or not. No, just simply any government, Russia, Israel, Canada, China, coming and saying, would you like to receive information about your opponent? If you say yes and look at that information, you have committed a very serious crime. And so, look, your best case scenario for Donald Trump, if you're an advocate of his, is that the president is so stupid that he can't possibly understand the law, even if it was explained to him. And it has not been explained to him over and over and over again. And every time he's like, well, who wouldn't look at it? I mean, it's against my opponent. It's good to me. It's good for me. It's bad for America. It totally undermines the country. And it's a felony under US law and you should go to prison for it, but it's good for me, so why wouldn't I do it? So your best case scenario is he's just a child and can't understand the most simple concepts. By the way, try that in your trial, see how that goes. Well, Your Honor, I'm an idiot. And so, the cops told me the law 7 different times and I robbed the bank anyway. And I didn't understand that I couldn't bring a gun to the robbery and the money they were giving me wasn't free. When I put the gun to the guy's head, I thought it was gonna be fine. I didn't get it. Try that, see how it works out for you. But for Trump, it's worked out his whole life.
There's such a slapstick quality about this presidency. It's like a really drawn out episode of a Benny Hill comedy special. Trump made it very clear that if given the opportunity, he would most certainly collude with a foreign government. And he then tried to resort to these mental gymnastics to confuse the American people as to what he said. And then he even tried to virtue signal by saying, anybody who would come to me with that kind of information, they would know that I love America first. We haven't seen that, especially when he sided with Vladimir Putin and a Saudi prince over the American intelligence community.
Yeah, everybody would know how much he values the country. Yeah, they would never give me a stolen information from my opponent because they know how much I love this country. Except for the fact that they set up a whole meeting where your son-in-law and campaign manager went to the meeting saying, wow, we'd love to receive that information. You know how unscrupulous we are. In fact, his son wrote in the email, if you have information from the Russians about Hillary Clinton, quote, I love it. That doesn't appear to make the case that you would not receive that information.
Nor did it make the case when he specifically requested that one country find the emails, give them to him. And look, we're sort of having fun, like speculating how stupid is he when he comes to the law? Does he actually know? Does he still not realize that it's illegal after multiple years of investigation? But we don't need to go through all of these contortions. We know that he knows that it's wrong, which is why after Don Jr. Had that meeting when they were preparing their statement of what it was about, he helped write the letter and lied about what it was about. If he thought it was totally fine and totally cool and totally legal, they would not have pretended that it was about Russian adoptions.
That's a great point, and we now know for a fact that Trump is the one that helped to write that letter. Initially, they denied it and they said, "Oh no, it was the president. No, it was Donald Trump Jr." Then later, like, fine, it was the president. Yeah. Okay, so if you thought there was something wrong with what was going on in the meeting, you wouldn't have to lie about it. It's a great point by John. And in his first point, he said on national television, clips are everywhere, where he said, I hope the Russians find those emails and give them to me during the campaign. And then he turns around now and says, well, everybody knows I wouldn't receive information like that because I'm too patriotic. Buffoon. Nancy Pelosi, are you ever going to do your job? Ever?
And yeah, so like you could see in that video, he was throwing up a ton of well, you can't know if it's bad until you look at it, and well, could it really be illegal just to look at all this stuff? Like I talk to people all the time. There's so much just purposeful, disingenuous misinformation there, saying, I have to report every time I talk to someone abroad. No, and nobody's saying that, and that we're not saying that, and everybody involved in this conversation knows that. It is when they say, we have broken the law to get something of value that we want to offer to you to help you in a specific election. That is not the sort of thing that happens in random cocktail receptions abroad at meetings of the UN. That's a very specific thing that is targeted at candidates like you. You've already shown an interest in that. You are continuing to show an interest in that, which is why we should have a special level of scrutiny on Donald Trump and anyone involved in his campaign.
In another part of the story, and I'm going to quote Politico here, they said he questioned whether he would need to report every negative thing uttered behind closed doors to US authorities. Wait, that isn't the scenario in this particular case. In this case, we're talking about somebody comes to him and gives him Oppo research about his opponent. So why did he unsolicited bring up now, if they're telling me things behind closed doors while I'm president and it's really bad, I'd probably report it, but I'm not sure that I would have to. Why? What are foreign leaders telling you behind closed doors? Mm-hmm. He constantly admits things he shouldn't admit. And if you're trying to figure out, is he a criminal or stupid? The answer is both. So My best guess is that he's referring to the meetings he's had with Vladimir Putin, where he banned any other American official from being in the meetings, and then eventually banned American translators and only relied on Putin's translators, and then says, out of nowhere, nothing as bad is happening when I'm meeting with foreign leaders secretly behind closed doors. They're not offering me anything, and nothing bad is being said. I mean, I would maybe turn it in, but I mean, I can't turn in everything bad that a foreign leader tells me behind closed doors. You know what I'm saying? Like, no, we don't know what you're saying. Why did you bring that up? Yeah. He's so bad at this. You know who else is bad at their job? Nancy Pelosi. If you can't impeach this guy, just retire already. Be done with it. Look, we have an impeachment petition, but so does everybody. Okay, tyt.com/impeach. But everybody wants impeachment because the guy's a lifelong criminal and keeps admitting it on national television. I would never work with law enforcement. Who would go to the FBI? Who'd be stupid enough to do that? Well, if you're the victim of a crime, you'd go to the FBI. If you were worried about crime, you'd go to the FBI. If you were the criminal committing the crime, well, then you're right. Then you wouldn't go to the FBI. Nancy Pelosi, it's not complicated. She said he is involved in a criminal cover-up. That is why I'm not going to do anything. Yeah. Okay.
And the reason that I was at the very beginning saying this is sort of backpedaling is many people, Trump defenders, are going to point to this to say, oh, you guys are freaking out. And in the end, he said that he would actually, he'd tell the FBI, right? He did say that. Okay, well, he had that interview on Fox and Friends early this morning, and just about an hour ago, he tweeted, "Thank you, Senator Marsha Blackburn, for fighting obstructionist Democrats led by crying Chuck Schumer. Democrats continue to look for a do-over on the Mueller report and will stop at nothing to distract the American people from the great accomplishments of this administration." Marsha Blackburn, of course, is a senator who just yesterday stopped an effort in the Senate to legally require people to talk to the FBI if they're approached by a foreign power. Now, that effort by Senate Democrats was not necessary. We're already talking about criminal acts. But Marsha Blackburn specifically protected people like Donald Trump from what he's now saying he's gonna do anyway. But he sure seems happy she stepped in.
I think it's no surprise here. We're talking about a president that made it very clear in 2016 that he's beyond reproach. This is the president that felt that he had the right to bypass a woman's autonomy to do whatever he wants. And so he's making that very clear in the Oval Office that he fully intends to bypass the Constitution and he fully intends to do whatever Donald Trump feels is favorable for his presidency. I think when we discuss Nancy Pelosi and what is the sandbag weighing her down for making the decision to impeach him is that no one is going to support someone who steps out against him. Every time he is held to the fire about his decisions, which are unconstitutional, there is no real drive to follow through with the consequence. And so I think that she's trying to stall the clock and she's trying to hope that maybe something happens beforehand, but he is such a reckless president that what I would be afraid of is that before he leaves office, he does something just to throw things off balance.
Yeah, well, he's off balance to begin with. And yes, for example, a war with Iran, I mean, anything could happen. I hear you on that, but we can't base our actions on what Trump might do as a maniacal response. Right. And I know the sandbag
Which is why impeachment is important, because if you wait it out, it's not going to change the outcome.
Imagine he wins re-election. Then he's going to say, well, you didn't impeach me before. What, now you're gonna go back 4 years? No way, and we just had an election. The American people said me and not you.
Which is the possibility, by the way, that he could win.
Of course it's possible, in which case he would now be definitively above the law and have a whole 4 years to do anything he wanted, courtesy of Nancy Pelosi. And I know the sandbag weighing her down. It's her donations. She raises a lot of money by saying Trump's the boogeyman, Trump's the boogeyman, give us money, otherwise Trump's gonna win again, give me money, give me money, give me money. And that's what Pelosi brags about and is famous for. She's raised over $500 million for the Democratic Party from corporate donors and incredibly wealthy donors. So she says, well, that's how I got into power, and Trump is helping me maintain that power because I can go around and scare the living hell out of those donors, and they give me more money, I'm more powerful, the country might rot and the Constitution is in jeopardy and the president's a lawbreaker, but so what? I accrued more power. That's Nancy Pelosi's calculation. So she doesn't lack the intelligence of Donald Trump, but there is definitely something missing.
But then it also stands to question Democrats who have conservative values. We have Republicans who came out and said, I would never vote for Donald Trump. And I think that he is a complete embarrassment to the party. You also have Democrats who are closeted Republicans, essentially, because they're using the same talking points, but the only difference is that they're hiding behind a progressive title.
Yeah, last thing on this. I went back and read that quote randomly this morning that you referred to, the Access Hollywood tape where he says, I would grab women by the genitals and not ask their permission. We forget how stupid the beginning of that quote was. And it's actually a perfect symbol for this story too. You might wonder why, because is he stupid or does he do things wrong? The answer is, again, both, and he showed it in that same Access Hollywood tape. He says, I sexually assault them without permission. Well, that's the illegal part, doing the wrong thing. And he says it in such an unbelievably stupid way. If you remember, the beginning of the quote is, I moved on her like a bitch. What does that mean? That sounds like something the 40-year-old virgin would say. Like, because he doesn't know what sex is. He doesn't understand like you're trying to prove how masculine you are, and you just told the guy, I moved on her like a bitch. What? And so every time Trump talks, you're like, what? Did he just admit he's a criminal, but do it in such a bizarre way, in such a brazen way that you're like, did he just rob the bank on national TV? Yes, Nancy Pelosi, he did. And if you don't do something about it, you should be removed from leadership. That's the conversation we need to have now, because we know who Trump is. The question is, are we gonna have Democrats who fight back against them, or are we gonna have a leader who refuses to lead?
I think we already know the answer to that.
Yes.
Which is why the only part I disagree on what you had previously said was that I'm not afraid that if he wins re-election, he will be above the law. I believe that he is de facto above the law right now.
And then it stands to question, what does the roadmap to dictatorship look like?
We're writing it.
And I think these are things that when we say these, people, they refer to it as far left radical speak. But the reality is that if you would have told us 5 years ago that we would have a treasonous leader who has colluded with the foreign government, who has time after time broken the law, has covered up, I don't think anybody would have seen it coming. And so what I'm afraid of is that all of these drastic measures and bizarre actions are dumbing down the American people. We're so mentally exhausted that he could do anything at this point and people would just go,
Yeah, well,
it's wearing us down.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Do you want to take our first break?
No, let's do the next story. Let's have fun.
Let's turn to that. Yesterday, the DNC announced who among the many, about 24 candidates would be qualified for the first 2 nights of the first debate. We have 20, and as of today, we actually find out which will be competing on each individual night, which starts to get a little bit interesting when you see who will have a chance to confront who on the stage at any given time. The first night, June 26th, we'll have Booker, Castro, de Blasio, who qualified somehow, Delaney, Gabbard, Inslee, Klobuchar, O'Rourke, Ryan, and Elizabeth Warren. And that's an interesting mix there. You have Elizabeth Warren, who in a lot of recent polls has been polling in 3rd. In some of the state level polls, actually, in the past week, she's been polling in 2nd after Joe Biden, against candidates of descending standing in the polls. Some people might see this as a negative for Elizabeth Warren. She won't be able to directly contrast herself with Bernie Sanders or with Joe Biden. But it does also mean that on the first night of the first debate, she's going to be, right now, the candidate with the most support.
Yeah, I actually think that it's a huge positive for her, and God bless. But in case anybody wants to start a conspiracy that the DNC is in favor of progressives or against progressives, or maybe they put Bernie in with all the other guys they're calling the second night the group of death, and don't take that the wrong way. It's just a reference to soccer. And in the World Cup, when you've got a bunch of great teams in one bracket, Germany, Brazil, and Portugal, they're all in the same bracket. That's crazy. That's the group of death. So that's the second night. She kind of has the first night to herself based on the polling. You don't know how people are going to do. Cory Booker might be amazing. You don't know how any of those folks are going to stand out on that night in particular. You just know the polling for now. But if you are conspiratorial minded, they explain that a mixture of senior advisors, campaign managers, and press representatives were in the room for the drawing. So it's unlikely the campaign managers for Gillibrand and Harris and Sanders and Warren will look at it and go, oh, you're gonna rig it in favor of Elizabeth Warren. No problem, deal. Right, they're not gonna do that.
Yeah. It's also interesting to speculate in that. We're gonna get to the second night in a minute, but you have Elizabeth Warren, she's going to be in that first night, but you also have in that same night, I mean, some names that I'm not particularly interested in, but Beto O'Rourke, who had been doing much better in the polls not too long ago, that is his chance to possibly draw attention to himself again. You have Tulsi Gabbard, who a lot of people on the national stage might not have seen much from yet, for the first time, right next to Elizabeth Warren. I would say similarly for Julian Castro, and Bill de Blasio will get to try to explain why he's in this.
People say that about de Blasio. At least de Blasio is one of 5 to 6 progressives. Why are 18 establishment people in the race? Michael Bennet. Like, I saw an NPR reporter ask him 3 times back to back to back why he's in the race, and he just couldn't explain it. Well, like, what makes you different than any of the other people not in the race? And so I am interested to see how Tulsi will do, because I think she could stand out by being so aggressively anti-war that creates a bigger lane for her than some of the others. I said when de Blasio was getting in, his problem is not so much that he's like everyone else. No, he's in the smaller group of progressives. But within the group of progressives, he doesn't have much of a lane there either.
And I mainly mean that his approval rating is so bad recently. Like,
no, I get it. But all their approval ratings are terrible. I mean, half the field is polling at 0%. So just keep it real in that regard.
Yeah.
So, and I think that Julian Castro's of the world have 0% chance of standing out, because they're cautious politicians. Not because I disagree with them, just because they by their nature, when even asked interesting questions, they refuse to give interesting answers. And so that's not a good way to stand out in a field of 24 people. So my guess is that Tim Ryan will be aggressive. You might agree or not agree with him. Tulsi will probably be aggressive.
Well, and timing-wise, with them ramping up to potentially start a war with Iran, that will certainly not hurt her in terms of pressing the core issue.
It really gives her, that's a great point, John, gives her an opportunity to stand out.
I think for sure that it's a matter of who's gonna go against Elizabeth Warren, quite personally, because Elizabeth Warren is what Sanders was in 2016. She's definitely seen as someone that's far left with some of her ideals around plans and policies that are going to disrupt the way that the establishment has been working. It will be interesting to see all of the circus choreography that goes on with candidates who like to tap dance around issues. Elizabeth Warren is a strong candidate because she faces the issues head on, which is really interesting because you have people up there who, have been prosecutors before, and yet they won't address anything head on. I think that it's gonna be one or two things. America's gonna have to decide whether they're going to continue to do things the traditional establishment way, the Biden way at this point, because he represents very much of that, or are they going to take a chance and do something different to get something that we've never got before?
Yeah. And then after we've gone through all that, we're gonna have the second night, and that's where you have a bigger cluster of those who are doing pretty well in the polls, including Joe Biden will be there that night. Michael Bennet, so you'll want to tune in, Cenk, see what he has to say. Buttigieg, Gillibrand, Harris, Hickenlooper, Bernie Sanders, Swalwell, Williamson, and Yang. And so a bunch of heavy hitters in the polls there, like first and second tier candidates, and third and fourth and fifth tier candidates. But that's, as you pointed out, being referred to as the group of death.
Yes.
Yeah. Now we don't actually have any eliminations here, and
no, someone dies at the end. It's Hunger Games.
No, then only one can live. Maybe two, depends on the berries. But in this particular case, it's still a Democratic debate. They're probably gonna be super nice to each other, especially this first debate. Maybe Bernie will attack Biden, we'll see. But I think it's gonna be a pretty polite affair.
Yeah, well, look, based on previous experience and what they've said before, my guess is that Bennett will just cede his time and not even say anything. He'll just say, oh no, I'm just here to have fun. Here, who wants to take my 2 minutes, right? Swalwell will talk about guns because that's how he's trying to separate himself. But no, I disagree with you a little bit, John, because Hickenlooper has gone from polling at 0% to polling at 0%, and he's trying to get out of that hole. And the way he's trying to get out of that hole is by attacking Bernie Sanders and calling him Stalin. Okay, and so he's now done that on a number of occasions and pretty much humiliated himself doing so. He ran this ad about like, we don't need any socialists to tell us how to run a government. In Colorado, we increased Medicaid by 5%. Haha, take that guy who thinks that the government can help everything. Medicaid is the government, okay, so just so you know. I think Hickenlooper will come out swinging, and I'm super curious to see what the reaction is gonna be and how others are gonna react. And I'm interested to see if the prosecutor, Kamala Harris, is going to prosecute her case, or if she's going to be reserved because it's early and her consultants will tell her it's early.
Well, I think the idea too is that you see people trying to get to the conservative base. You see people trying to play it safe because they're under the impression that if we can just maybe hang back on some of these issues a little bit, not be so aggressive with it, maybe they'll come over to the other side. And at this point, people who are going to vote for Trump are going to vote for Trump. They've already drank the Kool-Aid. There's nothing you can do to stop it.
Yeah.
And Buttigieg will use 12 SAT words in every answer and make you think that he's on your side, but you won't be quite sure.
There's a lot of candidates too. Like I feel like I remember the names of my Uber drivers more than I do some of the candidates that are running. Like there's just
Man, you know your
so
Uber
many.
drivers.
Yes.
Okay.
And the only other thing I wanted to say is it is interesting that on that same night you have two of the more outsider candidates in terms of where they're coming from with Andrew Yang and Marianne Williamson. And it'll be interesting to see, with so many people on the stage, they're gonna get 3 minutes each to talk, but they both have some pretty unique ideas. I know we've both enjoyed conversations with Andrew Yang. That's gonna be exciting to see that, the whole country basically being exposed to that.
Yeah, here's my fun prediction. I believe Andrew Yang will pull into the top 6. Now, if you say in a normal race, whoop-de-doo, top 6. But in a field of 24, when he was not a politician and started out with absolutely nothing, or actually the first national show to ever interview him and give him an opportunity to actually state his ideas. We've now talked to him on several occasions. And by the way, this is not about access. And so I wanted to make that point about Beto O'Rourke, who's in the first night. A really interesting article came out yesterday where Beto O'Rourke's people are pushing back saying, you know what, we're getting a lot of bad coverage. You wanna know why? Because when we first started our campaign, we did not talk to the national press. And the national press is vindictive like that. And so, there's almost no difference between Buttigieg and Beto O'Rourke, but Buttigieg glowing coverage because he's open to at least the national media, the mainstream media, and they're like, yeah, bravo! Beto, you're not as open, all of a sudden we don't like you. We liked you before, but now not as much. Whereas Andrew Yang has different interesting ideas. And we're talking about lanes in a field of 24, you've got to create a lane for yourself. And you check out the 1,000 proposals that Andrew Yang has, and you go, oh, he's got a lane, right? And he just needed an outlet to be able to express those, and now he's gonna have a national outlet to do that. I don't know that he's gonna pull up to the top, but I think most people would be shocked if he got into the top 6, and I think he will.
May the odds forever be in his favor.
All right, great. Let's take a quick break here, guys, and then when we come back, oh Jesus, another police misconduct story. Why do they do this? Why do they do this? It's painful, but we got to show it to you and show you if we're going to get any justice at all. We'll be right back. We hope you're enjoying this free clip from the Young Turks. If you want to get the whole show and more exclusive content while supporting independent media, become a member at tyt.com/join today. In the meantime, enjoy this free segment. All right, back on the Young Turks. Mario writes in, after months of watching the reruns from Italy, this is my first time being able to watch the live show. Perks of volunteering in LA. Wait, hey Mario, how you doing? Great to have you live. Theater Goddess says, yay, Ashlee Marie, it really is a happy Friday. Already have fans, that's kind of awesome, okay. And then on Twitter, I'm the Derpy Dragon says, it's not illegal if you win, ask all the war criminals making billions. Kind of sad but true. Timothy Halverson.
No longer a happy Friday.
Yeah, I know. Timothy Halverson says, hey John, is that the quote, new engagement haircut?
No, this is the I need to get a haircut. Don't zoom in on my head right now. No, I need a haircut. I'm gonna get one later today, actually.
Okay, by the way, happy engagement.
Thank you.
Bus.
Kind of the luckiest guy in the.
Oh, look at this guy. Look at this guy. So sweet. Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna be blushing for the rest of the show.
All right. So sorry, all the ladies out there. unavailable now. Okay, Johnny Pike.
So you had your chance, people.
Yeah, you kind of did. Believe me, he would have dated anybody earlier.
Yeah, don't freak out though.
It's true.
It's true though, somebody said in the control room. Okay. All right, last one here, and it's gonna lead into our story. So Lee wrote in from the members section, "Hi Cenk, first comment ever, just curious if anyone has reached out to Arizona Representative Greg Stanton about signing the Progressive Pledge. He did amazing things for Phoenix and is beloved here. Arizona is often overlooked, but we have a growing liberal progressive base. Stanton's pledge would hold a lot of weight with Arizona voters." Fantastic! Here's what I'm gonna ask you to do, a video that I'm gonna show you in a second shows you how to do it. Lee, you go ask him. So like I said in Des Moines in the speech, when someone asks who's gonna fix it, raise your hand and say, me, I'm gonna fix it. So you go ask him. Now, like I said, people are already doing it. So the Progressive pledges, the 5 pillars, Medicare for all, Green New Deal, college for all, higher wages, and an amendment to get money out of politics, tyt.com/pledge. So we unveiled it in Iowa. I did the speech in Des Moines, but then we went to Cedar Rapids and asked a lot of the presidential candidates. And a guy named Ivan happened to be there with us. And lo and behold, he's in Bloomington, Indiana, and he runs into Pete Buttigieg. So he asks him, watch.
Mr. Mayor, are you familiar with the TYT Progressive Pledge?
I'm not.
Okay, would you be willing to go to TYT/pledge and take a look at it and see if it aligns with your
I'll be
values?
happy to check out the website.
Thank you.
He didn't look happy to be checking it out. But hey, Ivan, perfect. Always be polite, because this is not about a gotcha. This is not about, hey, we're with a candidate or against a candidate yet. What we're trying to do is who agrees with us. And by the way, if you don't agree with the things in the pledge and you don't think you need all 5 of those things, then don't sign it, right? That's true for you, that's true for the politicians, that's true for the presidential candidates. So, but we need clarity, right? Everybody says they're a progressive. So the point of the pledge is, so are you? Do you agree with these things, or do you have a different definition of progressive? And some people do, and they explain that to us. So great question, and wonderfully done, Ivan. And what he did was, he put it on his own Twitter account, and then he sent it, emailed it to us at army@tytnetwork.com. And then Allison Hartson, who leads the TYT Army, saw it, sent it to me, and I was like, Allison, how are they already doing it? Because Allison's supposed to organize all the volunteers and teach them how to do it. They're like, yeah, hold my beer. Okay, boom, they're jumping right in and they're doing it perfectly. Every time, polite, good, crisp question, and now Buttigieg definitely knows now. So we're looking forward to an answer.
Can I just say, look, I don't know how long he'd been taking questions for, how hot it was, maybe the guy was tired, I don't know. But the way he responded, the dismissive, like if you asked me what that was and I didn't know, I might say, what is it? But he was just like, no, I don't know what it is. And he turned, and there were only a few pieces of information in there for him to have that response to. Well, either being asked to take a pledge, the name TYT, or the word progressive. And whichever of the 3 it was, it led to him going, no. That's
that was
good.
really abstract, actually, because I met with Pete Buttigieg because I wanted to confront his thoughts on the incarcerated voter, and I felt that as a gay man who's married, there were people who went to jail and were profiled so that you could have the rights that you and your husband enjoy today. And he was actually really receptive. He was open to what I was saying about socioeconomic disparity and some of the privilege that he had. He even went on stage an hour later and talked about it. So definitely whatever was in the water there was something that hit the gut really hard. And
yeah, let's keep it real, guys. So Jonathan Larson, who is not part of the editorial team here, and is been doing stories for TYT Investigates, which does objective reporting. So a whole bunch of reporters went there. He actually got there a day or 2 before BuzzFeed and some of the mainstream media reporters. And he did amazing investigative work and found out a lot of documents and people that had not spoken to others before that uncovered some of the racial issues that are in South Bend. Go to tyt.com and read those stories. Apparently Buttigieg has, but he's happy to go on Fox News, but he won't come on here, a progressive outlet. And you saw his reaction there. And so the questions that Larson is reporting on, that people in South Bend are asking, are super legitimate questions about why was a African-American police chief demoted? Why did the white police chief who came in this place not back up a black cop in a dangerous situation? Why there was an African-American kid who was found hanging, and that story was immediately, that case was called a suicide, his body cremated, and the case closed within about 24 hours or so. Read the story for yourself. So those are all these questions, and Buttigieg has answered none of them. So it's not, we're not, people sometimes say like, oh, you're biased. We didn't know anything about Buttigieg. How could we even have a bias? Nobody knew anything about him. For all we knew, he could have been the most progressive guy on the planet. Besides, Larson is in a totally different part of the company. So I don't know if that's why he had that reaction. You know, that might be a fair guess, but it doesn't matter. If he believes in those progressive topics, if he does, those policy positions, then he should sign it, not to do us any favor, to do himself a favor. Because there's a lot of voters who say, this is what I believe in, and if you want my vote, you know, then this is my platform. Speaking of which, last thing, right now, where do we stand? 18,549 signatures. And 8,329 people have volunteered to do exactly what Ivan did there in that situation. And a lot, you guys are going through the process analysis, reaching out to you guys, etc. And you're doing an amazing job. But if we can get that up to 100,000, 200,000 people saying, my vote depends on somebody who's going to do these 5 pillars. And if you're not going to do them, that's okay, bless your heart. But we get to pick one person to be our president. And I'm going to pick a person who signed this pledge. So, but wonderful job of being polite and doing it the right way. Thank you guys.
Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna have a hard transition because we've got another instance of horrific police brutality, totally unnecessary treatment. We're gonna show you just a little bit of it right now, but this is your warning that it's pretty dark stuff.
Put your hands up. Hands up.
There you see, get your hands up. Cop has his gun pulled on a family in the car there. We have something that's so common. A family goes to a dollar store, and then the 4-year-old girl apparently took a Barbie or something. Family didn't know, they drive off. The next thing they know, they're being threatened with death by cops who are totally out of control. And so we're gonna show you the full video in just a second, but understand as we get into that, the context, Drayvon Ames and his fiancee, Alicia Harper, say Phoenix police pointed guns at their heads while their 1- and 4-year-old daughters watched. The whole thing started again, as I said, after a trip to the family dollar store at a Barbie in a backpack. And so with that, here is the first part of the video.
Police? Yeah.
It doesn't open, I promise it doesn't open. You're gonna get shot. Get your hands off. I can't open it. Get out the car. You're gonna get out the car right now. Yes, get out now. Get out the car. All right, okay, hands up. You're empty.
You recording it? Yeah, I'm recording it.
Put your hands up. I don't give a. Put your hands up. Hands up.
So of course there we've cleaned up the language with some bleeping, but I think you get the general idea. This had been 2 cops yelling at a person who apparently could not get out of the car because they had a child on their lap, the door wouldn't open, something like that, that they were going to put a cap in her head. They were gonna murder someone because they have a report that a Barbie was stolen.
One of the quotes is, "You're going to effing get shot." Now, of all the different police brutality and inappropriate actions that we have covered, this is among the most insane. And we've shown you unarmed people getting shot for almost no reason at all. So why does this rank up near the top? Do any of you have kids? You know what 4-year-olds do? They grab stuff because they don't know, because they're 4. They're like, oh, that's a cool car. That's a cool Barbie. I like Barbies. I like cars. And so they grab it and sometimes they don't know they're not supposed to take it. And so you got to call, because sometimes cops show up and they hear shots fired, right? They don't hear it, but that's what the report was, like a story we did yesterday. Now in that story, the shots weren't fired and they went ballistic anyway. But in this case, the report is a 4-year-old took a Barbie, and you come in with guns raised, talking about how you're gonna shoot people, her parents in the head. I can't comprehend that unless they're all on steroids or some sort of drugs, or the training in Phoenix is, if you see anything, you see a jaywalker, immediately threaten to murder them. What on God's green earth would justify threatening to kill the parents of a 4-year-old who took a Barbie? Even if it was what? Malicious? What, the 4-year-old did it maliciously? That's why you threatened to murder her parents? Look, if you can't understand there's something deeply wrong with policing in this country, you're trying super hard not to see it. Because I guess you think, well, they wouldn't do that to me. I don't know why you think that. There's probably a good reason why you think that they wouldn't do it to you. And you really, really don't mind and sometimes enjoy that they do it to other people.
I'm just gonna call a thing a thing. It's definitely racism. And when I saw that video, it reawakened this PTSD from watching Philando Castile get gunned down in front of his family. And it really kills me all the more when I hear progressives say, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. What is happening to this country? This was going on long before Trump went into office. This, the body cams, the apps that allow us to witness and observe these atrocities may be new, but the racism most certainly is not new. And America has a long-standing history of anti-blackness and racism. In fact, when we look at the origins of law enforcement, they were originally slave catchers. Their job was, they were essentially an assets protection company because slaves were the assets. And so throughout the years, as we continue to develop government and as we continue to establish even local governing, no one has ever addressed the elephant in the room that law enforcement was never on the side of Black people. So when I watch a video and I see several Black people, including children, almost murdered over a 99-cent Barbie doll, they basically put a price and value to the lives of Black people. And so what I would ask people, more importantly, what are you willing to do to get involved? Because I guarantee you that if they come for us in the morning, they'll come for you in the evening.
Yeah.
And how many more times do we have to see Black brains splattered all across our social media feed before our elected officials speak up? We're talking about so many issues on the presidential stage this election. I want to know what they plan to do about police corruption and police brutality, because this is not just an isolated incident. This is an instance of systemic violence, and it's going to continue to thrive until we intervene.
Yeah, we, as you sort of alluded to, we show videos like this all the time. I mean, a tiny, tiny fraction of the videos we could, and that's only a tiny, tiny fraction of the instances that aren't taped. But I just get so depressed seeing them sometimes, because no matter how horrible they are, a significant chunk of the country, 20 or 30 or 40 or 50%, don't think that there's any problem with the cops. Don't think that there's any racism.
They ask the question, what did they do? They must have done something.
Actually,
so basically, it goes back to this idea that whenever we see violence taking place against African Americans, we ask ourselves, what have they done? Because there's always this sense of suspicion that follows us. Simply for existing. You see some of the memes about Backyard Becky or Barbecue Becky, and these white women who will call law enforcement on children who are just selling lemonade on a hot day. It really speaks to the history of America and how we see communities of color.
And it's as you said, it's 100% race. If I had gone into that dollar store and kidnapped the manager, they wouldn't have yelled at me that way.
You can pull out the cop's gun out of his holster and they wouldn't have reacted that way.
They got Dylan Roof Burger King after he slaughtered people. But that cop was yelling at them. I've never been as angry as that cop was in my entire life. I've been in actual fights. I've been jumped. I've seen family members die. I've never been as mad as that cop was about that Barbie. And I tweeted out that video and someone responded, they weren't threatening to shoot the people because of the Barbie. They were threatening to shoot because they wouldn't get out.
They couldn't open the door.
Exactly, and
the door
when I
was
saw
stuck.
that, I just thought, like, you can't have a police state, you can't have a dictatorship without a significant chunk of the country thinking the way that person responded to me on Twitter. And it's so sad to know that there is nothing that's gonna break through their minds on this.
It's cognitive dissonance.
Do you really think that the 4-year-old concocted a scheme where she would take the 99-cent Barbie, and then when the cops came, her parents would ambush the cops, pretending that the door doesn't open, and then pull out AR-15s and kill the cops? Does anyone in their right mind believe that that is a plausible scenario? Their lives were in not 1% of 1% danger, and if you think it was, there's something wrong with you. That you live in this weird, racist, fearful state where you're like, oh my God, black people, I'm so scared. Like there's something wrong with you.
And that's usually their argument when they murder us, that they're afraid. They didn't look afraid to me. And there's this expectation that we're supposed to meet an ambush with calmness, patience. We're supposed to have a lowered voice. There was even, when the gentleman was up against the car, the cop kicked his legs as to provoke him. And so I think this goes back to this idea that if you aren't gonna respond to any of the violence you're seeing, all of this trauma porn that we're broadcasting 24/7, we're gonna continue to press buttons and see what we can get away with until the black community responds.
Yeah, so lastly on this, I just wanna back up what Ashlee said. So just last night I had Tom Hartman on the third hour of the Young Turks. It's called The Conversation. Go to tyt.com and you can see the interview under The Conversation. And he wrote a whole book about the Second Amendment. In the North, the militia was basically police enforcement and could be called up for wars. In the South, they were just the slave patrols. That's what the militia was. And then they became the cops. The slave patrol became the cops. And so that is the origins of that, at least in that region of the country. And if you're wondering why, like for example, LAPD, even in liberal, so-called liberal cities like Los Angeles, why do they have some of the worst police? They actually brought in cops from Alabama to be the police force in LA. And then if you read any of the history of that, they became basically the largest gang in LA and used their badges and guns to rob people, steal, and run their criminal activities. So now that doesn't mean every cop did it, but can we all agree, at least on the tape that we just watched, that those guys should be fired? Imagine if your 4-year-old daughter had accidentally put something in her, or even intentionally, she's 4, put something in her backpack and they treated you that way, your family that way, and they almost killed you. Wouldn't you want them fired for having the worst decision making that we could ever imagine? And they have a gun and a badge. And if they shoot and kill someone, they will almost certainly get away with it. Jesus, if your doctor had that kind of bad decision making, you'd sue him. So the cops are supposed to represent us. They're supposed to work for us. Those guys should definitely be fired. And their manager, very likely, who trained them and told them to do that, should also be fired.
And sensitivity training is not the solution. We're past that. That's the go-to every single time we ask for accountability with the way that law enforcement responds to those situations. And they always come out with, we suspended them, we're doing sensitivity training. It's not sensitivity training that we need, it's the dismantling of a systemically violent nation that we've continued to live in and allowed them to run beyond reproach.
All right, we gotta take a quick break here. We'll be right back.